What is the best metro line in America? What does it mean to be the best metro? And what counts as a metro? I believe that, surprisingly, America's best metro isn't in New York, Boston, Chicago, Washington, D.C., or anywhere else you're thinking of. When I had a layover at the Atlanta International Airport in 2023, I got to experience the airside people mover named the Plane Train, and it was unexpectedly fantastic. I wholly agree with Substacker Hayden Clarkin when he says that the Plane Train may be the best metro line in the USA. I'm going to expand on Clarkin's worth by mathematically proving, to the best of my abilities, that the Plane Train is in fact America's best metro. Before we get any further, does the ATL Plane Train really count as a metro? Not really, but kind of. If a train runs on a fixed guideway, is fully grade separated, runs on discrete tracks, has fixed stations, and takes the public from point A to point B, then I think it's fair to count that train as a metro. The only way the Plane Train doesn't meet that definition is that the Plane Train serves only the patrons of the Atlanta airport, so it's not open to the public in the same sense that a normal metro is. That said, both regular metros and the ATL Plane Train have a paywall in that you have to buy a fare for a regular metro, and you have to buy a plane ticket to or from ATL to ride the Plane Train. So in a way, both have a paywall, though the Plane Train's paywall is in the form of airline tickets, which are much more expensive than your typical metro ticket, even including BART's high prices. Anyway, the Plane Train runs between 8 stations, and the system length is reported differently in different places, with Wikipedia saying it's 2.8 miles, and the ATL 2024 financial report calling it a 4.0 mile loop track. I'd trust the ATL report, but that report also says there are 16 stations. Maybe they mean 16 platforms, and if they're counting discrete components, then maybe they mean 4.0 miles of guideway for about 2 miles in either direction. It's not totally clear, but for the purposes of this analysis, I'll say 8 stations and a system length of 2.8 miles. Now that we've established that the Plane Train counts as a metro, how do we assess the quality of this transit line? There are many ways to do this, but for our analysis today, we'll assess the aspect of frequency, coverage, and competitiveness. Service frequency is how often the trains arrive. Coverage is where the train's route is relative to useful and desirable destinations, and competitiveness refers to how the mode's qualities like travel time and user comfort compare with those of other transportation mode choices. The Plane Train is very frequent. During peak periods, the trains arrive every 108 seconds. This puts the Plane Train on par with global leaders like the Copenhagen Metro, the Vancouver SkyTrain, and many automated lines across Asia, like the Taipei Brown Line, which apparently can reach 72-second headways, which is insane. Anyway, it's worth noting here that Alstom, the contracted operator of the Plane Train, is replacing the current fleet of Alstom Innovia APM 100 vehicles with the APM 300R model that, once completed, will increase headways to just 90 seconds and increase passenger throughput from 10,000 passengers per hour per direction to 12,000 ppHPD. Very cool. As for coverage, the Plane Train serves all terminals and serves security screening areas on either end of the airport. Coverage is probably the part where calling this a metro is the most of a stretch, since this obviously isn't a city. That said, no terminal is left unserved, and it's an airside people mover, which means you can take it between terminals for connections, unlike some airport people movers in the USA. Looking at you, San Francisco and JFK. I think it's fair to count the coverage here as good. And the Plane Train doesn't have any real competitor mode besides walking between the terminals, as the Plane Train is of course much faster. With minimal competition, the Plane Train is the winner of this somewhat silly comparison. By these qualities, the Plane Train is a good metro. With that established, let's compare the Plane Train's performance with the heavy rail metros in the USA. I'm using 2024 data from the National Transit Database for these comparisons. Find links to the tables referenced in the video description. The NTD is managed by the Federal Transit Administration, and the data stored in the NTD is provided by transit agencies. NTD is the USA industry standard for comparing transit agency data, so this is the right data to use in this context. Unfortunately, ATL doesn't report to the NTD, which makes sense because they're an airport and not a transit agency. Double unfortunately, they don't release an official estimate of Plane Train ridership in their annual reports. But we can make inferences based on what is provided. Clarkin says in his article that there are 250,000 average daily riders, but I couldn't find any official publication from ATL with that figure, though this ABC News article from October 2024 says that the airport reported 250,000 daily riders as of 2018. Given that the airport saw 107 million passengers in both 2018 and 2024, we can reasonably assume that the plane train saw an average of 250,000 daily riders, which is about 91.25 million annual riders. For the record, that is a totally insane ridership statistic, and it's a massive number of unlinked trips for a single line. Assuming 91 million annual riders, the plane train has more annual riders than all but 3 U.S. metro systems, the Chicago L, the Washington, D.C. Metro, and the New York City Subway. It's worth specifying here that when I say rider, I'm using the NTD definition of unlinked trip, which is a measure of discrete boardings of transit vehicles. It's not a measure of the number of people who use a transit system, as it's common for a transit rider to take a trip with a transfer, meaning that a single trip made by one person will count as multiple unlinked trips. Now, let's consider operating costs. ATL's annual financial report from 2024 doesn't itemize airport operating expense line items in detail, but a report from the City of Atlanta Auditor's Office from 2023 reports that the annual value of the operating contract with Alstom is over $22 million. Rounding up to $23 million and adjusting for inflation to December 2025 prices, then rounding up again, we can safely infer that it cost ATL $25 million to operate the plane train in 2024. It may have been less, but I think this is a reasonable estimate based on what we know. $25 million in annual operating costs is, unsurprisingly, less than any of the USA's heavy rail metros. Given the relatively high ridership, the ATL plane train has a cost per rider of just 27 cents. That's 10 times lower than the New York City Subway, the US Metro with the next lowest cost per rider. So, on the basis of cost per rider, the ATL plane train absolutely runs away with first place. But cost per rider is only part of the story. The plane train is a much smaller system than any of the USA's heavy rail metros, so it follows that it's much cheaper to operate. A stat called cost per passenger mile, the cost to move passengers relative to distances traveled, is a bit more illuminating. This stat helps control for differences in system lengths, so it gives us a more insightful look at the value of the service delivered than just cost per rider. Sure, the ATL plane train moves an insane amount of people, but it only does so on a 2.8 mile network. As I'm sure you're coming to expect, ATL doesn't publish plane train passenger mile data, but if we infer that the average rider rides an average distance of half the length of the route, then we get 127.75 million passenger miles, which is much fewer than the other systems. So, how does it stack up? Compared to the other metro systems in the USA, the plane train has the lowest cost per rider, the lowest cost per passenger mile, and the lowest operating cost, the shortest system, and the fourth most total annual riders. Only the last point there is surprising, but it's still very impressive. At one point in his article, Hayden Clarkin says he's not sure what this data says about the state of American public transit, but I'm going to draw a conclusion. I think our lesson from the plane train should be that automated light metros are the kind of rapid transit that should be getting built in the USA. The REM in Montreal is an ALM, the Vancouver SkyTrain is an ALM, the Honolulu Skyline is an ALM, and the Interborough Express in New York City is actually being considered to be built as an ALM. If ALMs can be built and work in North America, why shouldn't they be the rapid transit standard for any major city? ALMs deliver service quality superior to light rail, and with light rail construction costs growing to some crazy extremes in the USA on projects like the LA Metro East Side Extension, the argument that light rail will be cheaper to build is getting weaker. If it's going to exceed $1 billion per mile to build rapid transit in this country, then agencies might as well build new lines with a superior train technology. Austin, Texas would be far better off with an ALM than the light rail they're building, and Nashville would be better off with an ALM than the light rail they decided they didn't want. And Las Vegas, a US city where a metro would be the most obvious slam dunk of a project, absolutely should have an ALM running 24/7 between Las Vegas downtown, the Strip, Harry Reid International Airport, and the future Brightline West Terminal, though the case for 6 to 10 car metro trains in Las Vegas is worth considering. This has gotten a little off topic, but I stand by my love of the automated light metro. If you ever happen to be flying through or to Atlanta International Airport, be sure to take a ride on the plane train, especially if you live somewhere where you don't regularly use public transportation, so that you can have the experience of riding a metro. You might be surprised by just how convenient and good public transit can be. As always, thank you so much for watching to the end of the video. I have a great time making these, and it means so much to me that you choose to tune in. Thank you for watching. Station layout. And you walk that whole way before you get to the other train station. Wild.